Welcome to the Joypunk podcast. I'm your host, Janelle Etzel, and my guest today is Mark Bitterman. Mark is a well-renowned speaker and James Beard Award-winning author of 5 books, including Salted, a manifesto on the world's most essential mineral. A leading expert on finishing salt, chocolate, and bitters, Mark has clientele from top chefs to food manufacturers to home cooks. Mark leads salt-inspired dinners at many celebrated restaurants and lectures at culinary schools from Japan to Ukraine. Mark has been recognized as a local food hero by Cooking Light and a tastemaker in food and wine. He has been featured in the New York Times, The Splendid Table, Bizarre Foods, ABC News, CNN, The History Channel, among others. I've had the good fortune of sharing many meals with Mark in my own kitchen, in his kitchen, following our taste buds through a Portuguese settlement in China and even Mexico. And I'm always left with my belly full and, most importantly, my heart and mind as well. I am so excited to have you on the show today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me here. This is lovely.
So I guess why salt?
It was not a deliberate decision on my part to be known for salt. That's for sure. I'm curious about a lot of things in life, but I did kind of have a weird circumstance where I was traveling around by motorcycle in the south of France and then the north of France. And then I stopped at a truck stop and ate a steak, and it was a steak that happened to have salt on it. And it blew my mind, and I was like, what the heck's up with that? And it turned out that the salt was an all natural. It was before the idea of all natural. It was just salt, but it had weird, rugged characteristics. It was gray and silvery and chunky and moist. And I was like, this is trippy. And I went out to the west coast of France, met the salt maker, fell in love with the history and the ecology and everything else. And for the ensuing 20-something years, would pick up a bag of salt wherever I went. And so that was just that. It was a personal hobby, but we opened up a little shop back in 2006, and I decided to put my collection of salt in there. And lo and behold, I was telling stories about salt, and I found that was fun, and people bought the salt.
You're like, oh, I have a business off of this thing that I just had an interest in.
I actually was bashful. I was kind of felt ashamed because I was like, I just want to tell you a story about this stuff. It's incredible. It's really cool. And people would say, well, can I buy it? And I'd be like, I guess so. I'll figure out a price for you. Yeah. And I kind of begrudgingly would sell them salt. And that was my introduction to a world of retail.
I had to have a similar experience before real estate. Between being artist and learning to sell myself, I got a job at a jewelry store, and my boss, what he would have me do is like, you just tell the story of, the artist, the materials, and then it's up, to this person and like whether that fits what they're looking for or their need. And it was a really different way of coming to sales for me. And I think that natural storytelling, both you and I have that. Yeah. So I wonder if like you have these salt stores, you have to train your employees. I bet many of them come to you because of their passion for ecology or food or these other things. They're not salespeople. So how do you train them, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, really what we look for are people who have a real understanding of hospitality. And to me, that's everything. I think that the idea of making people feel welcome, creating a space of belonging, to kind of put a woo-woo sense on it. I mean, a place where you walk in, you're like, I found my place. Yeah. And so it takes a certain kind of person that loves to create that space and animate it. And that's really what we look for, believe it or not, above we used to think we were always looking for unicorns, super expert in food, incredibly, passionate about this and that, and just kind of find this unicorn that could we realized, no, all that matters is that people are hospitable, caring, welcoming people.
And I imagine, because when you're dealing with like the flavors, people can get intimidated, right? Yeah. Like, oh, I grew up with just kosher salt on the table. And then to find there's this whole world that could be really intimidating. So being really approachable and welcoming people in and educating.
Yeah, I think there was, especially in the earlier days, it was sort of like even mentioning that there could be something that wasn't this industrialized salt, like kosher salt or iodized table salt, even saying there was something different that was just fancy and bordering on pretentious. And we're just like, look, what we're talking about is something that's just made by hand. Yeah. It's like your grandma's handmade moccasins are not fancy and woo, aren't you special? It's like, no, my grandma made these. They're just moccasins. And that's what natural salt is. It's something that a person with, a connection to the land and a knowledge of ancestral ways of doing things sets to work and makes something from the sea. And that gives you a good salt. If that's fancy, I don't know.
Feels almost more spiritual, like you're connected, right? Like
I think that's what I kind of felt when I first kind of keyed into salt. I just had always thought about, I grew up with a garden and all that kind of good stuff. I didn't really think of ingredients as having a place. It's just something you've grabbed from the market, the supermarket, whatever. And it was when I met the salt maker and I saw this basically a 2,000 or 3,000 year history of salt crystallized in a little grain. And this guy's telling the story of how people do it here and how they've done it for 1,000 years. I was like, this is incredible. Like there's such a wealth inside of this simple ingredient.
Yeah.
And it gave me such a sense of like my own personal connection to it. Like this was, I was participating in something bigger than myself when I had this food in my life.
You were just talking about like the, place, like going and like the connection of land. Can you go tell us a little bit more about that?
If I were a grad student and going to do a PhD, I think my PhD would be on place and probably place as it's defined by the foods in our lives, the food systems in our lives. Obviously, historically, that's what place was, right? It was an environment from which we derived our sustenance and our connection to the land and to the plants and animals there determined our culture. Yeah. That's what created our culture. Culture is almost like a system for operating in a community in relation to nature. So that'd be my PhD subject if I could do it. Maybe I'll see if I can't convince a university to let me in. As it relates to salt, for example, or chocolate, or any of the foods that are in our shops, it's something that I think is sought after today. I think that what we have seen in the last 100 so years is food that has been robbed of its place. The industrialization of food is really, the whole idea is like, you've got this food. I'll give you an example. Like cheese. Yeah. The cheese is like, okay, I got some cows. And the first technology that happens thousands of years ago is like, holy cow, I have this cow and I don't know what to do. It makes milk and I drink all I can and then it goes bad. I can't seem to cope with my cow milk. And they're like, whoa, let's introduce some bacteria and let's age it and we can create cheese. We're like, wow, fantastic. This is so cool. But that cheese was a very distinctive reflection of the local milk, the local bacteria, the local temperatures and climate, and everything involved in making the cheese.
The grains and grass that the cow is eating.
All of that, exactly. Yeah. The grain was as much a part of the cheese as anything else.
Yeah.
And so that's how cheese has always been. And now, granted, you could transport it a little bit, which was fantastic. So you could move it around from village to village. But generally speaking, it was a very distinctive reflection of a very distinctive place. And you could still go to the white chalk caves of Roquefort in France and see what Roquefort cheese is really all about. And once you do, I swear that stuff's just, I feel like I've got DNA in those caves now. I love that cheese so much. But along comes Kraft, a man who says, I don't want to do business like that. I want to make money at a serious level. And this is a day and age of modernity, and I can harness science and I can pasteurize the milk to stabilize it. And I can create a cheese from that, or something that we'll call cheese to be generous. And he basically creates a pasteurized cheese, Velveeta. Now, Velveeta we are told it has milk. I'm sure it does, but God knows where it comes from and where the cows come from and what the cows are on and what the cows' lives are like, much less the grain and the petroleum-based fertilizers that are going into the grain. And the entire system is this gigantic abstract process that feeds industrial volumes of milk into a thing that comes out with a little yellow block at the end that ships everywhere in the world in the exact same uniform package and lasts forever. So what was something that was intensely rooted is now utterly devoid of any root at all. It doesn't have any actual connection to anything.
Yeah.
And when you eat it, you know it. You're not participating in life on this planet. You're kind of participating in an economic process where you're getting calories out of something that's designed to feed a machine.
There's something so complicated, though, in this as well, because I grew up with grandparents, refugees from the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma, farmers that loved and embraced this, being able to get that block of blue cheese. So I grew up with grandparents that the treat there was that we had those craft processed singles in a plastic wrap.
Yeah.
And that was the food anytime me and my brother could get and unwrap and that, and it to this day, when I was pregnant, I would crave it because I think it was the flavor of family. I'm someone who loves to cook. I'm someone who loves a lot of variety of flavors. And I find sometimes it feels like I'm disrupting my own family network in the way that I eat because I'm actually trying to move away. I find that sometimes the way that I eat can be taken as a rejection of my own small family culture, but to move us all along to just to become more human again. So it's just a really interesting tension.
No, and I hear you. The role of processed food is first off, it's not intrinsically bad, right? It's not. I mean, a lot of the reason why we have it is because food was unsafe, or food wasn't transportable, food wasn't accessible to people. There's a lot of really good motivations behind it. And I don't mean to be sounding critical of the whole concept of processed food, but what has attracted me is that. And my critique of it would simply be that I don't appreciate a world in which we start to lose a sense of the distinct nature and quality of where we live. And so during my lifetime, for example, I've watched roadside turnoffs off a freeway. They used to be mom and pop restaurants and mom and pop markets and fruit stands and cheese stands and honey stands and all these things. And now it's 7-Eleven and McDonald's. Everywhere you go. I don't mean one or two places or 40% of them or 70% of them. At this point, the entire country has become a single blanket of a very small handful of providers. And what I love about food is it holds a key to unlocking the door to take us back to some place that is ours.
Our family goes to the Oregon Country Fair every year.
Heck yeah.
It's so fun. And my kids have been raised there and
they were raised at the fair.
Well, I mean, they're fair kids, they're part of Girl Circus and that. It's the place that they're most free. But the food there, they have no electricity, no running water, and they have some of the best food on a mass scale of anywhere I've been. And every time we leave and head on the freeway back to Portland, it is so mind-blowing to me that how did I just have beautiful fresh food with no throwaway containers? And yet, with all the resources available on this freeway, that the only option is this. It's like there's something so broken in that.
It's funny
because we can do it. We can absolutely do it.
I agree with you. It can be done, and it can be done in a modern place. There's still that Europe is still a good example of there's an uneasy compromise that still exists between. I would just call it quality, smaller production foods and a modern life. And it can be done. But I don't think that we live in the forces of our economy they don't really grant a lot of amnesty. They're we want it all. And they're getting it.
I had a fun salt thing to share with you. I have a My girlfriend Lupin, who's one of the best home chefs that I know, home cooks, like just I've had some great meals at her house, and her daughters have been raised on home cook food. And her oldest went to Andover, a boarding school on the East Coast, and they've got pretty good food. But she was like, "Mom, you have to send me salt. Their salt is such crap." And it made me it really warmed my heart. I was like, as a 9th grader, this girl knows there is something essential missing from my life.
It's so funny because I mentioned that I used to be bashful about it because I love to share opinions and be opinionated, but I never presumed to like tell someone what's right for them. And in the salt department for years, I was like, look, I really think this is like the stuff. Like it really elevates and it reconnects you with your food in an amazing way whenever you're using it. But what's funny is, long story short, we've been in business now 17 years, maybe going on 18 years. Our first customer, the first time I handed salt to somebody was 2006. And now what's funny is that we're 16 years old, people have grown up.
Yeah, with your salt.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so what we are kind of seeing is people they don't treat it as special anymore. Mm-hmm. It's just a necessity. Yeah. And I'm like tickled by that.
Yeah. I can't eat without it.
And I hear it all the time. And especially, by the way, it is the funny thing. It is kids are quicker than adults. Mm-hmm. First off, they delight in things more, parents, we're just jaded. I don't know. I don't give a damn. Just give me the food. Kids are like, oh my God, I want the black salt and I want the flaky one. And I want, they're paying attention.
There comes a point for like a lot of entrepreneurs where they're passionate about something and they're just following, like you're just following your tongue for salt or your nose for salt. And then you wind up with a business.
Yeah.
And so 16 years being open, storefronts, you've gone through COVID running storefronts, which I imagine has just been really difficult, a lot of challenges. Yeah. Separating the journey of salt into like, there's also just this journey of being a small business owner. Yeah. And what has that been like for you? Like, is it like, well, I have to do this? Or have you found that like, wow, I might be just as delighted with business as I am with salt? Or
I think honestly, early on, that's a really good question. And very early on for me, I realized that the topic of salt, the topic of like really good chocolate, and frankly, just as important for us all along was a really beautiful place, a place that brought dignity to the products, like just gorgeous, gorgeous. Our shops are very beautiful.
They're beautiful.
Stuffed to the rafters with fresh cut flowers. There's all these beautiful handmade products. The shelves are all made out of old growth Doug fir and yellow pine and the cedar. They're gorgeous they're tiny and they're modest, but they're beautiful.
Magic pantries. And
so I did thrill to what we were offering, but I will also say that what I found striking was, business is so hard. Mm-hmm. Retail is so hard. It's like, if you really want to like really kind of just dream up the worst idea you could come up with for a business, like just get a think tank together and bring all the best minds. What they'll say is, how about you come up with a brick and mortar? So it's the age of digital. It's the age of Amazon. It's the age of everything. Let's get a brick and mortar shop and we'll fill it with things that people don't even know they're interested in. And when they do, for example, you finally get someone to try something like salt, they only use a little bit of it at a time over the course of a year or two. Mm-hmm. And so you'll rarely ever be able to sell them anything, even if you do convince them that they need it. Let's build a business around that.
Yeah, brilliant.
It's just total genius, as you can. So, again, that's kind of what we came to. And I thought that was lovely. And I fell in love with the concept and the process over time as it developed. But what was truly amazing was the journey for me. Like I learned that I had to work with people and I had to enlist a community of people in ways that I had never done before. Mm-hmm. So this became a path of personal growth, really. Mm-hmm. I learned about money. Mm-hmm. I'd kind of personally, it's not a great thing to say on something entrepreneurial related. But I kind of poo-pooed money. I was like, it's not the most important thing to me. I don't know that I don't really understand the nature of it. And I didn't really grasp the importance of it. So I had to learn about money and the power of it and the potential that it brings. And I had to learn about operations and about websites and about legal and about the gajillions of things you have to know and balance all that as a human being. And then, of course, not just as a human being, but as a business person, as a father, as a boss, as a husband, as a friend, all the different things all the different hats you wear. So it's an incredible process. And frankly, being business to me is like really maybe one of the most creative and powerful things you can do with your life.
Yeah. It's what I think. I'm an artist, went to school for art. I love making things. And I will say one of the things I like to make is also money. And one of the things I like to make is businesses.
Yeah.
But I had to think of them all in the same way. And I think I got so lucky to find that, like, yeah, as you said, business is this incredible art, and it's a community-based art. You
cannot do a great one by yourself. Maybe you can, but I don't.
You can't.
The best ones are with other people.
Yeah, and so you hold a vision, and then you got to talk everybody into like believing in this vision, and then getting everyone on board. And I find myself more and more these days realizing that being the leader isn't really about power. It's like everybody else has the choice to leave. I'm still, here. So it's about total surrender, really.
I agree.
Everybody else feels like they have more power.
No, I think you're spot on it. An example would be one of the things that if you want to be successful at business, you have to learn fairly quickly what you're not good at. Or you will learn. You don't have to. The world
will tell you.
You will be told.
Yeah.
And you will have some people putting you on their knee and sitting you down and saying, you suck at this. And you start to hire people who aren't bad at these things. And you start to find people that are smarter than you in one way and then another way and then another way. And through this, you're building basically a community of people around yourself that are all better than you at various things. Sometimes profoundly better than you.
Yeah.
So you're humbled.
Yeah.
And it's your honor to be there with them in their role. And so you are, in a sense, a servant leader. You're there to just support them and empower them to do their great work that they do better than you.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's like very fulfilling.
Yeah. Something I've heard you speak about, or we've talked about before too, is like when some people think, oh, entrepreneur, how sexy, you must have had a dream to like put something out into the world. And it's like, no, I was actually just really irritated by something, or it came from like, why can't I find this?
I always said that. I heard this once and it stuck with me, which is this funny idea. People say that entrepreneurs do what they love. And I think it's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
They do what they hate. They find something that they find intolerable and they address the problem.
Yeah.
And it becomes like a mission.
Like there will never be just Morton's kosher salt as the only option ever again.
No, it was very much, it's true. It was like, and especially, and it still fuels me today. If you look at a lot of the cooking shows and cooking magazines, people say, well, what salt? I should use Diamond kosher salt. That's what all the pros tell you to use. And it's a cabal. It's not true. It's a terrible product. It's a refined product that has terrible flavor. It has no provenance. It has no connection to anything, including, by the way, no cuisine.
Yeah.
It has no background in our world. And it devalues the food you put it on, but yet everyone says to use it. So it's like really fun for me because it's like every day I'm like, there are a lot of people out there that are not being served by the media. They're not being served by the stores they shop in. And I like to kind of mess with that.
Yeah. You're like, they've got a huge market still to penetrate.
It's a huge market out there. And we'll just keep chipping away.
Any changes that you've seen in how people are interacting with retail and I know so many of us going through COVID, we want to be changed, right? Like a lot of us want to be transformed. We want to see things be different, but there's also there's also some things we want to go back to. There's trends that are like, I think this is temporary, but what changes have you seen, or what are you kind of looking at?
That's a really hard one. And I think it's like the question almost that our society faces today. Where the heck are we? Because there's been this obviously a bit of a withdrawal, right? There's and people working from home, when people working from home, a vast amount of things don't happen in a city anymore. A huge amount of what a city was ceases to happen.
Yeah.
And what is that doing to the place we're in? And similarly with retail, we have the pandemic, which kept us indoors, and we have the coinciding trend of, digital commerce and all that other stuff. And by the way, I should add into that the big box stores, the mega marts that consolidate everything into one roof. And one supply chain, by the way.
Yeah.
So that's happening. And yet the pandemic's over and people are, we just had Groundhog's Day. People are poking their nose up out of their little holes and they're looking around and saying, what's out there? So I'm super curious about the question you asked. And I don't know the answer. What I think is interesting for me is that the meadow has been growing. So we struggled through the pandemic like anybody. It was brutal and very, very scary. All of our employees rely on us for healthcare insurance.
Yeah.
I have a family. We're a little retail business. We don't have gigantic cash reserves and huge amounts of assets we can just sell off and live off and be secure. We don't have, frankly, I'm unemployable. So like, what else am I going to do in my life?
Salt, everything must go.
So it'd be a tough one, right?
Yeah.
So it was a scary time, but we had an incredible response. Everybody came together and we did okay. And coming out of it, what's been surprising is that I still feel like, there are still ways I feel like our society has not returned to normal or to the prior levels of being outdoors. But our sales have grown year over year over year. And by the way, we're not really doing anything fundamentally different, except we're focusing on the fundamentals. Incredible, loving, welcoming presence for people who come in. So we're doing the fundamentals, and people are responding by coming.
Yeah.
And so my real answer is that I think that no one knows, including the market, that no one knows what the heck is going on right now. But on an individual level, at a case by case level, people are saying, if there is something attractive and lovely for me, I'm going. I'm in. Give it to me.
Yeah.
I'm desperate for that. As a matter of fact, what we're seeing, we're seeing people are just like, it's really electrifying what's happening in our little shops.
Yeah.
I think it's because people say, please, yes, please, we want that.
It would be reconnected on a multitude of levels.
Yeah.
You spoke a little bit about provenance and like the sense of place. What do you think that is for Portland? Like when you're like, what's the taste of Portland? Yeah. What's this area we live in? And how does that differ? And do your stores actually, come to think of it, differ? Like whether you're in Japan or you're here or New York? Like
our stores differ by neighborhood. So we have 3 neighborhoods that we're in Portland. 3 what I would call some of our kind of more shopping area retail neighborhoods. North Mississippi Avenue in North Portland, Northwest 23rd, and then Southeast Hawthorne in that kind of old retail quarter there. And each one of them it's so different. I can't even tell you. They're like different countries. So for example, the North Portland, that's where we opened our first shop. Yeah. And those customers are old school. They go right in, they go right into the salt wall. They know exactly what they're looking at. They're buying the most esoteric, crazy dark chocolate bars. They're buying really weird, cool bitters and a bottle of vermouth to go with it, and talking about these cocktails they're putting together that are based on pre-prohibition era, formulas they want to do for a cocktail party. Like, damn, these people are like hardcore.
Yeah.
And then you go to like Northwest 23rd, and it's way more of a like just kind of like a breezy excitement about something new, and they're out there with their friends and they're sharing some time and bringing some guests from out of town, and it's a social environment. Then you go to Southeast Portland, and people are coming in and they're neighborhoodies, and they got their kids and they're shopping for something fun, and they're going home and they're cooking a dinner and they're forgetting an ingredient. They're coming back into the shop again. And it's like, it's beautiful, the difference. And,
Yeah.
and we are all about that. Like we don't even pretend that it's a one size fits all.
Yeah.
So each shop is within the constraints of our promise to be super, super committed to each of the categories and each of the vendors that we represent. Each shop's super different.
I love that. We find that with real estate too. And oftentimes commercial clients will come to us because they know, like they trust us. We know the people that make up the neighborhoods. And in that, we really understand how they want to shop, what they're looking for in that like small retail experience. And it's different. It's like traveling to different cities or different countries almost. It's
I
so
love
cool.
that. I love that.
Yeah.
You know, we're in New York. We used to be in the West Village, and during the pandemic, we had to fold up and we moved across the island to Nolita, north part of Little Italy in Soho. And it's a whole different customer there. And plus the city transformed, and you go to Brooklyn and it's so old school, and I love what you see there. And we were, we had a shop for some years right through the pandemic in Tokyo. And those people have a very different way of living in their city, I would say.
Yeah.
Than a Portland person.
Did you have to, was there any surprises or relearning what hospitality means between these different cultures?
Yes. And for us, it was a refinement of learning what hospitality really meant, period. Because what you would see is people would come into the shop from a different place in New York City than they would in North Mississippi Avenue.
Yeah.
They come in from a different mindset, different set of ideas and values. And so we would try to kind of understand them where they were. And that evolved into us really thinking about hospitality as always trying to be receptive and welcoming to anybody.
Yeah.
That works in Japan too. There's some mannerisms and habits you have to get into.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
When our shop
Don't
opened
kiss
up,
the customers.
No kissing, no hugging, which sucks because I love to kiss and hug. And I was like, I'm hugging on a customer. I still remember like the physicality that I brought to the shop. This is going to sound a little bit weird, but post-COVID, it sounds weird anyway. But when I would talk to customers about salt, I would pour the salt out of my hand. And so I could show them the crystals and the moisture and the color of it and how the fragility of it. And you have to touch it to do that.
Yeah.
And so I do that. And then before I could stop them, customers would pick it out of my hand and put it in their mouth. And I was like, okay, go for it. And just remember one day I find myself, John Malkovich is like taking salt out of my hand and putting it in his mouth. And I'm like, what in the heck? How did this happen?
It's great. It's a Malkovich movie.
It totally is. And that's happened like it's untold number, it's like you're talking to Martha Stewart or Julianne Moore or whoever else. You're like, it brings everybody together, this kind of thing.
What I knew that was going to be really hard about this interview is that you're so fucking interesting. Like I've talked to you about so many things, like your past, the stories. Like I just never know what I'm going to get. Like unfolding the present of your presence, of the Mark Bitterman, and I don't want to do that because I know that you are such a forward-thinking visionary, and I really saw that come alive for you in COVID, and I think that was the natural problem solving that you had. How do I get people together? How do I save this city that I love? And so I want to talk to you a little bit about, you've just been so passionate. And of course you are too. If I think about it, like this is a man that's passionate about place and something that came and threatened our sense of place, threatened our business community. And I just saw you step into action. So I just wanted to ask, like, what are you visioning and what are the things you're really thinking about right now about our city?
Yeah. To air dirty laundry, it's become a little bit fashionable to trash talk a city. And I'm always struck by that. Like people complain about this and complain about that. And I get it. Like we all have our frustrations with something, especially when something was working so well and then it stops working so well. And you're like, what the heck happens? I think what's odd about that is missing that a a place isn't defined by whether or not there's graffiti
Yeah.
or that there's a certain trend or whatever. It's defined by something much deeper. And frankly, it's the kind of intersection of history and the present. There's all these amazing things with people coming from all over the world, from all different walks of life, from all different perspectives, and coming into a place and working together as a community in different businesses and in arts and in public life. And all these things are happening. And it's true that something can be incredibly disruptive to that, like a pandemic. It can just kind of like, blah, and just like what, all those beautiful things are still there. They're just not as, they're not as visible. They're not in force. So I think that it's worth remembering, like, just because you get in a fight with your partner doesn't mean that they're not wonderful.
Yeah.
And frankly, even if you break up with your partner, it doesn't mean they're not wonderful. They're the same person. You're the one who didn't work it out. So I feel that way about Portland. I think that this town has tremendous vitality, tremendous generosity, a thirst for innovation. It has this amazing architectural kind of human scale to it. It has obviously the usual things that everyone praises about it, the fantastic geography of river and mountains and the sky that is weirdly like the Simpsons commercial cartoon. It's always got this couple gorgeous puffy clouds.
Throw in a rainbow or two when you least expect it.
It's incredible. So I love the city. I do think though that the only way to respect a city is to contribute to it. I think you can't expect it to be good to you all the time. It's like, what of that John F. Kennedy, That's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And I think that applies to a city, and especially to those of us who have businesses here, is we have an amazing power of agency. We can do so much. So if I don't like a neighborhood, why don't I move into that neighborhood? Why don't I participate in it? And frankly, that was one of the reasons why I was super motivated to open up a shop on Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard. Since I first came to Portland in 1990 something, I was like, what a cool, funky little strip this is.
So cool, yeah.
And you could take it for granted. People don't realize like how unusual it is. All these old buildings and all these old, weird, funky shops, tons of thrift stuff. And I'm thinking, well, a lot of that kind of Main Street USA is boarded up and gone forever.
Yeah.
And we have it alive and well in our town.
A lot of it. Yeah.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
And they're all independent businesses. And like, damn, this is cool. But it was struggling a bit, and it maybe still is struggling a bit. And one of the things I saw was this beat up, terrible looking space. And it was just vandalized and forgotten. And it was just like, oh, it was terrible. But it was next door to a fantastic business, one of my favorite places in the world, Powell's Books.
Yeah.
And I was like, something's not right here. I don't like this, but I love this street. And I'm thinking, well, you take something that is a black hole of negativity and you put something that is as beautiful as you know how to possibly make it. And one of our core values is uncompromisingly beautiful. We just do whatever we can think to make a place more beautiful and inviting. What happens if we replace those two things? We take out that skeezy rundown thing and we put something that has our heart and soul in it, all the beauty we can muster. Will that make a difference? And I didn't know. It was risky and scary as heck. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen if we put our shop here.
Yeah.
But we did. Our landlord was a wonderful person who was all in, and our community was all in. Powell's Book says, what can we do to help? All of our neighboring shops say the same. And we open up and it's just been spectacular.
Oh, that is so cool.
And people come in, I kid you not, this is going to sound so hokey, but it is hokey, but it's the truth. Every single day, 2 years now we've been open in that location. Every single day someone comes in and says, I'm so glad you opened up here.
Thank you, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. That means a lot. I can tell you as a business owner, when someone says thank you, I go down and march in the Manzanita parade at the coast with our office, and people will literally come and just thank you for participating in our community. And I will keep doing this for for years to come fueled on that alone.
No, it doesn't get old.
No.
And you kind of look behind you because obviously it's like us.
Yeah.
Like you're thanking us for being here,
Yeah.
But it shows something like, that I believe that it is the special little shops, the special little restaurants that make our towns the place we want to live.
Yeah.
We don't move to a place for abstract reasons. Like we think we do, like a zip code. Like, I want to be in a cool zip code. But what makes a zip code cool?
Yeah.
It's relationship to all the cool stuff.
You won a James Beard Award for your book, and the title of that book?
That was Salted, a Manifesto on the World's Most Essential Mineral with Recipes.
Oh, okay. So we can all learn to like use salt better in our kitchen and start to play and discover.
It has a lot of depth to it. Talks about the history, talks about nutrition, talks about how different salts are made, what the different types of salts are, then how to use them in everyday cooking. And it was kind of a funny experience for me because that book almost wasn't. That's not true. It always was, but my publisher rejected it, which was a frustrating thing.
How did you wind up, what was the perseverance that wound up getting it to happen?
I booked a lunch appointment. I then flew down to Berkeley and went into the restaurant. And before the publisher got there, I put all the salts on a table in the middle of this nice fancy restaurant in Berkeley. And the publisher arrives and he's talking. And as we're talking, the waiter comes up and he says, "Can I help you?" And he's like, what are these? And I then told the waiter about some of the salts.
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, cool. The chef would like to know about that." We get some food. A minute later, the chef comes out and I tell him more about salts. Then the chef gets a couple of the staff and they come over and they're listening by the table and I tell them some more about the salts. And meanwhile, my publisher has this kind of like sheepish look on his face, like, "Oh shit, I
missed it.
I missed it." And then I said, "So, I think that you guys should really publish this book." And he's like, "Sometimes we reject a book that we really kind of were thinking we might publish anyway. So we'll do it."
Way to save face.
Yeah, way to save face. He didn't do it very elegantly, but he was a really good guy. So I'm grateful for him.
And that's awesome. Now that we've got everyone craving salt or curious, hopefully, where can they find you? Where can we buy your salt? How can we learn more?
Yeah. We have retail shops, 3 of them in Portland, Oregon, and 1 of them in New York City. Mm-hmm. They're called The Meadow. Specialize in salt, chocolate, bitters, and flowers. So they're your only salt, chocolate, bitters, and flowers shops on the around. We also have a website, themeadow.com, and we do wonderful things out of that. It's very down home like our shops. So we pack everything. We literally let you place an order. You can say, "I just love lavender and baseball and chicken." And I want a collection of fun things from your shop. And we shop like that for people all the time.
Oh, that sounds so much fun. It's great for gift giving.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
And then you also coined a term that is like added to the lexicon of food. And I'm not even going to begin to try to say it. It's like, so you tell us.
Yeah, I was standing in the shop one day, long time ago, with a customer back in like 2006 or something. And it was this sunny, beautiful day. And someone said, "Are you like a salt expert? Kind of like a sommelier?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm a sommelier." Yes. And it just came to me out of the blue and that word stuck. And it's in a dictionary or 2.
That is so cool.
That makes me happy. I guess I'll just put that on my tombstone.
I love that. And I so thank you for being someone that just shows up everywhere you go with the responsibility that it's going to go better because I'm here. And to me, that's hospitality too. It's it's taking responsibility for the outcome, for the interaction. And you're a consummate host and you always make any hour I spend with you better. And I feel lifted and my heart feels full. So thank you so much for being here today.